What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Life Inner Show, where we help people make more, work less, and create lives and businesses they love. And actually, I think that's the most important piece of this whole puzzle. I am your host, Jason Wojo. I am joined by my Polish co-host, Polish Pete. That was kind of redundant. I said Polish twice. What's up, buddy?
Hey, because I'm extra Polish. That's why. It's not redundant when I'm just extra Polish. That's it.
You should change your name to Polish Peter.
Yeah. Well, you know what? Somebody on the show's got to be really Polish.
Dude, you're just jealous because I have the Polish last name and yours is kind of nondescript.
That's all you got. You don't even like Polish food, man.
I know. That's
Talk
true.
to me when
true.
you like eat pierogi and sauerkraut and sausage and, gołąbki and then all that stuff.
Oh, kapusta. Ugh.
That's right.
All that stuff. Ugh, nah, not a fan. But my brother loves that stuff, so we have it in our family. I'm just not one of them. Well, listen, man. Polish food aside, we have an awesome episode today. We're talking with Nathan Caldwell. So Nathan is a guy that you actually introduced me to. Mm-hmm. On your podcast, we're going to talk about kindness. And you might think this isn't a strange topic to talk about, but I'll tell you, this is an impactful episode, right? I can't tell you how many things you're going to listen to here and have a light bulb go off for you.
Yeah, and the cool thing about Nathan is, I had my own show on my own podcast, and we started diving deep into this whole kindness thing. And he's got different case studies that can actually prove how kindness, how much impact that has not only on your personal life, but also your business. In fact, I think his book, it talks a lot about business culture, how kindness impacts it to actually be making more money. So if you are a single person, or if you're on a company or a business or whatever, or you're just a father or mother or whoever it might be, listen to this episode, because kindness is one of those mindsets, one of those things that you do that has a huge impact on your life and the people around you without actually sometimes even realizing it.
That's right, man. This is a fantastic interview. I can't wait for you guys to hear it right now. So let's go to it right now. This is our interview with Nathan Caldwell. Check it out.
Hey, Nathan. Well, thanks for being on the show, man, on Life in the Show.
Thank you for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited a lot too because of the fact that you were on my own podcast a few weeks ago, and I had a great conversation with you in regards to kindness and the book that you wrote. And I believe this is a great fit for the Life on the Show because it's one of those things that I think is really needed where we're at right now, right? And how you actually use it in your own life and how it has an impact, not only for you yourself as a person, but the people around you. So tell the audience a little bit about yourself so they get an idea of what you're up to, what you're doing, and then we can dive into the actual topic.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Nathan Caldwell. The book that we're speaking about, I wrote and it came out last year. It's called Empowering Kindness. And the whole philosophy of the book is understanding that as leaders, you have a responsibility, or the highest calling that you have as a leader is to teach your people how you want them to treat others. And so it's about really understanding effective culture within your organization and knowing that culture is not about beanbag chairs and foosball tables. It's about making sure that your people are treating others the way you intend them to be treated. And the idea of there's two meanings behind the title too. Yeah. Empowering kindness means that you as a leader give your people the ability, autonomy, and authority to be kind to others. But then also when you are kind, it empowers you. It makes you feel better. And there's a lot of medical studies and behavioral studies that I dive into in the book that show that we perform at our optimal level as far as physical health, mental health, and even organizational health when we are kind to others, when we're in a culture where kindness is king.
Nate, I'm just curious, what spawned this thought of writing this book?
The thought was, I grew up understanding from my father. He taught me about being kind to everyone, making it a part of your character. But then when I got into the business world, I started to see that was not always the practice that people were accustomed to. They use the term team, but then do not act like teammates. They act like the hot shot player who's showboating for themselves. And so I started questioning myself. Am I doing it the right way? And I came away with it understanding that it's got to be the right way. Because I'm also a person of faith. And, one of the Bible verses that jumps out at me very loudly is that God created us and he created good works that we would walk in them. And so my thought is, if we have, this great designer who created us and good works, then if we do them, we probably ought to be able to benefit from that in some way. There should be some evidence that shows that this is the right thing to do. And so I thought, let's go to science. Let's see some medical studies that show that people who are benevolent out of the goodness of their own hearts and not for selfish reasons, not because they want to look good on Facebook or Instagram or anything like that, but because they want to do good for others. Let's see how those people perform physically. And I apologize. I had no clue that there was going to be lawn maintenance going on behind me today. So if that becomes a problem sound-wise, please let me know.
It's all right. Let's invite a long guy into the show too, man. Let's have a conversation.
Yeah, that's right. We're gonna be kind to the long guy. Well,
Exactly.
so man, I'm fascinated by the subject, and it's interesting to see because I'm wondering. Well, first of all, this topic of kindness is far from exclusive to business, right? Mm-hmm. And it's something that permeates every aspect of our society, and so it's an issue, quite frankly, everywhere. And the message that you're sharing is relevant everywhere. But also, I can't help but think of, we've learned some of these maxims throughout life, like, hey, nice guys finish last.
Yeah.
Right. Or you get trampled on or walked on or taken advantage of if you're nice. Address some of those misconceptions.
Yeah, I actually have a chapter in my book that talks about these lies that we believe. And nice guys finish last is very high up there. And the reason why it's a misconception is because being kind does not mean you are weak. Being kind means you are doing the best thing for the other individual. And Peter and I talked a bit about this before. I think, Jason, you and I spoke a little bit about it on our phone call too. It's that kindness is not necessarily weakness. It is oftentimes tough love, where you have people who are in a more experienced position in life, reaching out to others who are less experienced and requiring them to carry responsibility, or giving them advice on how to be more responsible and step up to the plate. I'm from Canada. Peter and I established that in the other podcasts we were doing. And so hockey is a big deal to me. And one of the best things that I love about hockey comes in the movie Miracle, where there's that locker room speech where the coach yells at the player and says, I want you to be a hockey player. Now, that's requiring a lot of that individual. What he's meaning by that is toughen up, get out there, take the hits, block the shots for your teammates. Don't shy away from bravery. And so all of that comes into play with kindness. It's helping people grow.
Man, so two things really stuck out to me as you were speaking about that right now. One is kindness. It doesn't, because I think there's a misconception about there that kindness is about being super soft and gentle, and like that's not so. And actually, so I want to talk about that in a moment about what kindness really is, because I think there might be some confusion. But secondly, it's actually harder to be kind. Like, mm-hmm. You could not be kind and just take care of yourself. But I love what you said. It's kind of about, if it's about the other person, it's about you going to them and helping them. Like, and how is that weakness? Like, how could that be weakness? So you're doing the harder thing, in my opinion. You're doing the more difficult thing. You're going out of your way to help somebody else. And that gets into the point I'd like you to clarify now is, what really is kindness? Like this, because you kind of threw me for a loop there when you mentioned it being tough love, because that's not what most people think about.
Yeah, it's not hard to throw Wojo for a loop either. So, I mean.
Well, yeah, looking at what kindness truly is, oftentimes people have a misconception that it is weakness. It's just letting people do what they want to do and giving them a pat on the back and saying, they're there, it's okay. that's not kindness. That is shying away from good conversations and growth. Kindness is self-sacrifice for others. And so you can see that in the ideas of servant leadership, where you have people who are in a position to help others and take the opportunity to do so. And it goes beyond just even inconvenience for them. We often talk about how, you're a good friend if you're willing to pick somebody up from the airport or help them move. And there's the
two
whole,
universal qualifications.
Yeah, there's the whole Seinfeld joke where he's like, our friendship isn't at the level of me helping you move yet.
Peter, I'm not sure. I don't know if I'd help you move, man.
So yeah, he hasn't helped me move yet. He picked me up from the airport before.
I have picked you from the airport. We're halfway there.
All right. Well, it's growing then.
I have to reconsider this relationship.
But the idea of going, not just inconveniencing yourself, but actually sacrificing for others. So a great example of this in the business world is somebody who's an appointed leader, whether they're a manager or a VP, they got there because they were either hired in or they were promoted to that level. And then them showing others in the organization, elevating their team, those who are doing the work, those who are accomplishing the project, and saying, instead of just taking the credit for themselves, they're passing that credit on to their team, the people who are working for them. And so they are self-sacrificing the credit and giving it to those who are on their team and making sure that they get promoted, that they get the credit for it. And we can see this too I love to use the example of a meal. For the three of us here, I'm sure that we could spot $10 so somebody could go get a meal at Chick-fil-A. And that's not really self-sacrificing. It's inconveniencing because maybe we would use that $10 for us for something else. What would be self-sacrificing though, is if we were to skip a meal so that we could give that meal to others. And in that lesson of self-sacrificing, then we experience a lack and the other person experiences a gain. And it helps us with a perspective of understanding what somebody else could be going through, walking a mile in their shoes. It shows compassion to that individual. And then also it means a lot to that individual because they're not only experiencing it for themselves in receiving that kindness, but then they're also able to speak about that to others, what somebody has done for them.
You're kind of blowing my mind here a little bit, man, because you're really redefining what I had previously thought of as kindness. Most people, when you think of the word kindness, I think they'll think like, holding the door for someone, smiling for somebody. Maybe you're going to get them a Starbucks. The person behind you in the line in the drive-through, but certainly not self-sacrificial. Why do you think so? And listen, this could be my perception, but it feels like many people are not and do not live at that level of self-sacrificial kindness, and it's more of a superficial, or even some people aren't even on the superficial level, and they're not even there yet. They're just not at all. They're just not nice for whatever reason. What do you think some of the contributing factors to somebody moving along this path would be, and why are so few people doing this, it seems?
Well, I love that you brought up, there's a couple things I want to address here. So you brought up the great example of what people refer to as random acts of kindness, where, it's that, you mentioned the example of pay for the person behind me in Starbucks, and then they pay for somebody behind them, they pay for somebody behind them. And that's great, that's fun, but it's not true servant leadership. It's not true self-sacrificial act of kindness because, somebody pays for me, I pay for somebody else. I'm just kind of paying it forward to someone else. Pretty much everybody in line at that Starbucks is there because they can afford Starbucks. The difference would be going to somebody who has never experienced Starbucks and saying, hey, look, you haven't had this yet. I have the ability to give it to you or to expose you to this, and so I will give that to you. Now, Starbucks isn't the be all and end all because obviously it's just overpriced coffee, and in some people's opinion, it's not the best coffee out there. But then you also mentioned, so there's that misconception of random acts of kindness. And then you brought up the idea of why are so few people actually kind? And this goes to, I love to reference, and many psychologists reference, the character arc of Ebenezer Scrooge in The Christmas Carol. Because throughout that story, he gets to a certain point of epiphany where he finally learns what the true meaning of life is, which is to show kindness, mercy, goodness to others, to use your vantage point to provide to those who can't repay you. Tiny Tim could never have repaid Scrooge financially. You know, Bob Cratchit, he could not have bought Scrooge a Christmas feast that Scrooge couldn't afford himself. But what they did was repay him in a way that was their currency, which was they were already of humble means. They already had the epiphany of what the true meaning of life is. And so the reason why there are so few people who, or what appears to be so few people that operate on this idea of self-sacrificial kindness is because they haven't yet had that epiphany. They've been fed all those lies of, you know, nice guys finish last. You got to be aggressive, go after the win. And what they are fed is that goals are all that matters. Character, or the actual process of getting to those goals, principles, can be sacrificed at any given moment to get to the end goal that you've established for yourself. And so what I'm trying to say is that even if you get to those end goals, think of all, and I'm sure that you guys have talked to so many people who have gotten there, where they've achieved financial wealth, freedom. They could buy anything they want, go on any vacation they want. And if you ask them on their deathbed, what do you regret the most? Or what would you like to expand upon more? All of them will say, I wish I spent more time with my family, or I wish I would have done this for this person. Regrets are never, I wish I would have spent more time at the office. I wish I would have stayed away from my kids more so that I could have built my business even bigger, because we don't get to take any of that with us. And money doesn't comfort us when we're lonely. And so there's so many people that provide that epiphany, and Scrooge, I think, is one of the ones that we see that, and everybody can understand it. And yet we finish watching that movie and walk away and say, oh, that felt good, but we don't put ourselves out there to experience it ourselves.
So listen, so I'm going to be a little Scrooge right now. Okay.
Great. Yeah.
Because I mean, you were on my podcast and we talked about this, and I totally get where you're coming from. I totally get how you're explaining, but being a little Scrooge now. So what is the real benefit? Like, why would I do this? Like, is there some kind of and I think you brought up a study on my, my podcast about those 3 different groups, right? Mm-hmm. But can you share with an audience, like that study maybe, or some kind of a benefit that the person would get out of this?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the studies that you're referencing that I shared on your podcast, the 3 different groups there was one group that was studied that were people who just basically sat on the couch potatoes. They never did any benevolent acts. They weren't looking to do any charitable deeds or anything like that. They just kind of looked out for themselves, and much like a couch potato, are just ingesting entertainment for themselves, passing time. Then you have another group who is actively out there doing good things, but for the wrong reasons. They want to look good on Instagram, or they want to get their name published on a plaque on the wall so that they can say that, you know, hey, look at me, I'm great because I did this wonderful thing for someone else. Then you have a group who is actually doing it out of the goodness of their hearts, where they truly believe that doing good for those who cannot repay them is a way of life. And what they found was those people who did the kind deeds for the right reasons, we would say, were combating heart disease at a rate that was just incredible. Their life expectancy was extended. And then the group that was doing it for the wrong reasons versus the couch potatoes, there was no physical difference. So the results of this, and going back to that idea of we're designed for this, we as humans are made for helping each other, for being kind to one another. It's that we perform at our optimal level, our physical health, our mental health. Peter, another study that I shared with you too was there was a group at Harvard who broke some students into two different groups. One group watched a video that was just kind of mundane, like, I don't know, deer munching on grass or something. I mean, that's a beautiful sight, but you know, it just kind of
like watching Wojo sit there. That was probably more.
Exactly. The other group watched a video of Mother Teresa doing kind acts for those who were sick, those who were dying. And the amazing thing was the group who watched Mother Teresa, their immune system got elevated during the video and stayed elevated for a full hour after the video. Whereas the mundane, nothing happened. Mm. And so there is a physical reaction that we have from our physical health standpoint. The other side of it is, you know, again, asking, well, why would we do this? Incremental health benefits. Hey, I could eat a salad instead of a Big Mac and achieve the same thing, Nathan. So why would I go out of my way to be self-sacrificial? I like my lifestyle. I want to binge watch all seasons of House and not go out and do anything because it's more relaxing to me.
Okay, now you're talking.
Well, now I'm talking. But there's the mental health side of it too. And so I love to reference Robert Herschevek. He tells a story where in all aspects of his life, from public appearance standpoint, he looked as though he was phenomenally successful. He was, you know, on Shark Tank, investing in all these businesses, just blowing up success-wise. And for those who are into pop culture as well, he won Dancing with the Stars. So he was at an all-time high, according to public opinion who know who he is and follow what he does. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, he talks about how his marriage was falling apart. His children were ostracizing him and didn't want to talk to him. And he stood on the balcony of his house, waking up one day and just thinking, I want this all to be over. And so he sought out, what can I do to stop this pit in my stomach? What can I do to change the way I feel? And a good friend of his recommended that he take a look at a parish that was up in Seattle that focused on providing services to the homeless. And so he went out there, he volunteered his time, he spoke directly with people who were homeless, found out what was hurting them, what could benefit them. And he found out that one of the simplest things that they were all requesting was dry socks. Now, anybody who has lived through a Canadian winter as a kid, if you've ever stepped in snow and got your socks wet and then put them in your boots or try to spend the rest of your day with wet socks, your feet are freezing and you're uncomfortable all the time. Homeless people in Seattle, once their socks were wet, they couldn't just throw on a fresh pair. So Robert Herschevek decided, as long as this organization is in existence, you will never have a need for socks again. And he converted one of his companies to mass producing socks for all the homeless people that were engaged in this organization. And he talks about that moment of helping those who could not even repay him as saving his life. It gave him purpose. It gave him hope. It gave him connection to fellow human beings. And so that is the important factor of Why should people do this? Well, go back to the Scrooge example. The whole story of Scrooge, his whole life until his epiphany of it matters to do for others, how happy was he?
Right.
Answer it. How happy was Scrooge?
Oh yeah, he's miserable.
Yeah.
Absolutely. We use the term to label people who are miserable. We say, oh, you're a Scrooge.
Do you think,
but he had that epiphany.
Nate, do you think like, you know, I feel like a lot of people aren't even kind to themselves, and maybe now but I don't know. Also, I don't know the relationship between that. Like, do you have to be kind to yourself first to be kind to others, or does being kind to others help you be kind to yourself? Is there any relationship there?
It's a little bit of a chicken and an egg, but the truth is, when you start being kind to others, it opens up that floodgate of the actual physical health reaction, and you begin to feel better. Just like I mentioned before about the elevated immune system levels of the people watching the Mother Teresa video, that's because it is releasing endorphins. And so when you are kind to others, it helps you. And just like Robert Herschevek, when he started helping those who were in need, it releases that better feeling. And when you make it, and what I'm talking about too is, you know, earlier you mentioned random acts of kindness, and that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about making kindness part of your character, where you can't help. Like you mentioned, the simple example of holding the door open for somebody, but you also can't help seeing somebody who needs their car jumped, and you are over there to boost it for them. Or you see somebody else who like trips and falls, you help them up. Or you have somebody on your team who's doing a great job, and you go to bat for them to get them that raise, to get them that promotion, rather than you taking the credit yourself. It is about looking to others and seeing what you can use your personal influence for to help them. And so that's what it is. When you start doing it, it helps you with your own perspective of yourself and feeling better about what you're doing and how you're using your time, how you're using your ability, how you're using your skills, and it gives you purpose.
Well, you know, so really, you know, I'm hearing a lot that kindness is an act of service. Mm-hmm. And the benefit that you get from yourself, you know, I'm remarried now, but my first wife, I'm divorced. Hardest thing I ever went through. It was awful. And I found for me, one of the things that was pivotal in helping digging me out of that mental and emotional hole was serving others. And so I was volunteering a lot. I was getting out of my own space, out of my own mind, out of my own misery. And that it felt so good. And it just like, you know, there was something magical about it that just made a huge difference for me. And I think that is something that people can tap into constantly, all the time. There's always opportunities, and keeping your eyes open is probably one of the first steps to doing this, which actually leads me to like, how do people start along this journey? Like, where do you recommend they begin? Or is it really just an awareness thing? Is there something else that has to happen?
I'd say, and this may sound oversimplified, but I'd say look up. Too many times we're too busy glued to our phone, we're glued to our TV, we're glued to our calendar. And if we can look up and see others as the human beings they are, and understand that each person that we encounter every single day has a need within their life, we have an opportunity to uncover that. And it also, like you said, it does take some self-awareness where we see ourselves in a position of influence, no matter if we have a title or not. Okay, the three of us, we all have families. Am I right?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Number one position of leadership is how we influence our family, what we teach, and the culture that we build within our own family. Patrick Lencioni, an amazing business leader, he one time had a bit of an epiphany where he came home from work one day and was speaking to his wife and said, you know what? I spend all day advising giant companies on their 3-year plan, 5-year plan, 10-year plan. We're spending days and days and days in all of these meetings, and we're crossing every T, dotting every I. And then I come home, and when it comes to our family, we just wing it. And how many of us are guilty of that, where we don't sit down and proactively build out what are our family's core values? What are the goals that we want to achieve as a family? And I'm not just talking like a Disney vacation. I'm talking about what can we do as a family to help others, to teach our children how to treat others well. And so we're all in a position of influence, whether it be family, whether we are in a classroom and we have an opportunity to be an influence to our fellow students, or we're on a sports team and we can be of influence to them. One of the most beautiful videos that I've seen shared around on LinkedIn was in a basketball game, and a player misses a shot or he gets dunked on and he's like, just his head's down. And one of his shorter little teammates comes up to him, lifts his chin up, and pats him on the gut and pats him on the back. Like, that little guy, his teammate, wasn't in a position of amazing authority, but he did what he could with the influence that he had in order to tell him, literally, keep your chin up. And so we all have those opportunities around us, and it's important that we all take advantage of them and be that influence of good, influence of kindness to those around us.
Man.
So listen.
Yeah, go ahead, Peter.
This is a great conversation. I love this conversation where we're going with this, because there's a couple of things that I want to address too. How you speak to someone who is quote unquote people pleaser, right? Or they, in conversation about, you're a people pleaser, right? How you deal with that when it comes to the kindness? Is there boundaries that needs to be put in place? Because I could go on as the people pleaser and do the acts of kindness all day long, right? And nothing gets done.
Right. And, Peter, that goes back to what we were kind of alluding to at the beginning, that sometimes kindness is tough love. And to recognize people who are take, and to tell them, look, the way you're acting isn't appropriate. And that is an act of kindness of itself, to help people to see what's going on in their own lives, to be that reflection for them and give them positive criticism so that they can grow. Now, the tricky thing about that is you have to have a relationship with that person for them to hear you out on it, though. How many times do we see strangers jumping on to other strangers in social media and saying, oh, you need to do this different, or you need to think differently. And that person just bristles and says, who are you to tell me what to do? Versus somebody that I've known for years, who I respect, who I have a love for, who I have a relationship with, pull me aside with their hand on my shoulder, say, Nathan, look, do you even understand how you're coming across in these meetings? Do you understand that the way that you're speaking, because I'm a passionate individual, and I don't know if you notice this, but I speak loudly and I'm very emphatic. If I even suggest something in a meeting, I can come across as everybody else in the room might be thinking, oh, well, we can't oppose that. What if I speak in opposition to that? There's no way. He seems totally sold on this. So I've had to learn in my own personality too, that I need to tell people ahead of time, look, I'm not married to this idea. Here it is. If you don't like it, tell me. Like, we have to give people that mirror sometimes to help them out.
I love that. That's a really good point that you brought it up. I love how you address that, the point. I don't know if Wojo has any kind of questions in regards to specifically to that, but because I want to jump into something else that I think is really important. Do you have anything, Wojo?
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So here's the other aspect, I think we mentioned it on my podcast, and I think it's an important thing to discuss, is kindness, and if there is any relation to bullying, because I think that is going on a lot, whether it's in school or grown-ups or adults or everywhere, you know. So talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, absolutely. There definitely is a relation between kindness and bullying. And it's one of those things where it also depends on what people mean by bullying. So bullying, to me, what I understand it to be, because I went through it when I was a kid, I've also experienced it in the corporate setting of seeing people who bully others in business. And what I see it as is when people effectively convince others that they are not good enough. And that can come from physical bullying, that can also come from intimidation, that can come from verbal bullying, it can come from cyberbullying. But the end result is the effect that it can have on people is them believing that they're not good enough. And that's horrible. It's terrible. What bullying is not, though, is voicing an opposite opinion at times. And so what that means is, you know, you and I sit down in a meeting and you believe that we should do this one marketing plan, and I believe we should do a different marketing plan, and we passionately discuss it. And I share my points. No, I think I'm right because of this, and I think you're wrong because of this. You share your points. That isn't bullying. It's okay if we disagree. Oftentimes, businesses make the mistake of hiring for culture in a mistaken way, where they think that culture is, or hiring for culture is hiring exact replicas of the thought process that already exists in the business. But what you really do want is opposing thoughts. You want there to be this creative brainstorming where people come up with a variety of different solutions. And then, though, all come to an agreement on what the plan will be and walk out of there with everybody backing that plan and putting it to the test. And then the results are, if the plan does not work, then you go back to some other ideas that were presented and begin testing those out. Where the bullying comes into place, though, in the work environment is often when you're in that meeting, a lot of different ideas are shared, everybody comes to an agreement on what the plan will be, you walk out of that room, and then you have that one person who in the meeting was like, yep, I'm good with this, and then they secretly go one-on-one to defect, to convince others, oh yeah, we said it was okay in that meeting, but don't you think it's really dumb? Don't you think? And then they sabotage it. And there's no way for a business to remain healthy when that's the practice in place. And so the way that kindness, though, combats bullying is for those who want to be in opposition of bullying to actually be brave enough to stand up to it and to stamp it out, not with reverse bullying, where it's like, hey, you were really mean, and now we're going to be mean in return to you and teach you a lesson. It's that you kill them with kindness, that you prove that kindness is the way to go. And so oftentimes that looks like when you repay someone good. And so those who would be in opposition to you, instead of you then combating them, that you are going to them and you are treating them well. And you are showing them that, look, you know, you can't stamp out hate with more hate. And I think that you and I was joking about a little bit of an example, but, you know, sometimes people unite over hate, where you find out, oh, hey, you hate the Backstreet Boys. I hate the Backstreet Boys too. So we can be friends. And then turns out you find out, oh, well, they also hate, like, I don't know, the NSYNC. And you're like, well, wait a second. I'm a fan of NSYNC. Do you have to hate me too now? And it just becomes this ripple. And so it shouldn't be that we unite over hate. It should be that we value others' opinions and realize that hate is not the way to go.
Yeah. The reason why I was asking about this is because I wanted to bring up the point, and when it comes to kindness, right? Because we talk about kindness being to others, right? And a lot of times in that conversation, what ends up happening is there isn't any first time people approach us and then we're kind, right? The other side of it is how you kind when people approach us when it comes to bullying or whatever the case may be, right? How you deal with them when it comes to kindness, how you address that, right? Because I think that's happening when you're a kid, what happens when you're an adult and all that kind of stuff. So I'm glad that you spoke about that, because that kindness is not only, and it's coming from you, right? On an everyday basis, but when you're dealing with something in life, when it comes at you, how kindness can have an effect on that as well. Make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you'll allow me to use kind of modern day mythology, I have always grown up being a huge fan of superheroes. And so many of them have origin stories where they're the loner. They're the one who gets beat up, or they get teased, they get bullied. You know, Peter Parker as Spider-Man is a great example of this. And then he becomes Spider-Man, and his Uncle Ben gives him that awesome phrase, with great power comes great responsibility. Well, he gained that power, and, you know, there's always that classic scene in the comics or the movies where he then has the ability to now beat up the person who beat him up. And the power comes when he restrains himself. The power comes when he goes out and saves lives, when he does good for others. Otherwise, he just becomes a bigger bully, and he does nothing to actually stomp it out. And so I think that is the biggest lesson of what we can do with bullying. Sometimes we can't retaliate to the person who is being our bully, that we need to just exit from that relationship, or we need to exit from that situation. And then, though, not allow them to be oppressive in knowing our greater good of what we can then do.
So Nate, this is, it's easy to be nice to nice people, right?
Yes.
Or it's easier, I should say. So would you say that it's true that everyone deserves kindness? You know, are there people that you see as we're kind of talking here that are harder to be kind to because of the way they treat us or they treat other people? Talk a little about that, about like that differentiation.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And I think that a lot of times it comes back to we never know what somebody is going through. And so the cashier at the grocery store could encounter a customer who's absolutely rude, but it turns out that it's because they're picking up their medication for their sick child. And there are circumstances where that happens so often. And so it is upon us. And there was one time I was speaking with a good friend of mine, and he was explaining how he was being mistreated. And so he said, it almost makes me want to go and do this certain thing in retaliation. Not malicious, not evil, but it would definitely expose those who were mistreating him. And I said to him, I go, well, but is that your value system? Like, if no one was treating you poorly, is that the play that you would make? And he was like, no, not at all. And so I said, well, don't let others shape you into something that you're not. If you know the right thing to do, go ahead and do it. Don't let people win at making you feel bad, but then also turning you bad. Always stand up for what's right.
Right. And, you know, and as you're talking, like, I'm realizing, you know, sometimes it's the people that are the meanest that actually need the most kindness in their lives, because maybe they've been treated poorly in the past and they have scars, or like you said, you don't know what's going on in their life. And to recognize they have a story as well that you know nothing about. They have struggles you know nothing about. And so maybe even more so look to those people for the people you should be extra kind to, not like you're saying, retaliate against or be mean back to or compromise your own character or values. Nate, this has been awesome, man. I really want to thank you for being on Life in a Show. So the name of the book is Empowering Kindness, Why Unlocking Power in Others Will Be Your Greatest Success. Nate, where do people learn more about you, what you're doing, and get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I have a website, empoweringkindness.com, and the book is available on Amazon. So I'd love for people to also reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm always taking a look at my messages there. If anybody has any requests or want to strike up a conversation, I'm always open to that.
Awesome. Thanks again, Nate. This is an incredible conversation. I think everybody needs to embrace kindness, and the world would be an incredible place if everybody did that. Thanks again.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it a lot.
Man, I really enjoyed that conversation. Nathan's a really cool guy, and this topic is phenomenal. Like, I really, as I mentioned in the episode, a lot of times I'm like, wow, that's not even how I even used to think about kindness. He talks about, sometimes it's tough love, sometimes it's saying no, sometimes it's self-sacrificial. These are all kind of things that I really, when I typically thought of kindness, I thought of someone who's like, the kind old lady who like just smiles and bakes you cookies, and like, maybe it just is just, like just a more pleasant person. But kindness, as we talked about it here, is something completely different.
Yeah. And I think when you start looking from that perspective, after this particular episode, go out there in the world and start looking for the opportunities, right? They're going to come in now based on what you know. You're going to see the opportunities in a different way, right? Of being kind to others and being kind to yourself. And one of the things that I know we brought up on this particular podcast, you asked the question about being kind to yourself. I think that is important as well, right? And he talked about the guy from Shark Tank. Yeah. That example, I think, was huge when it comes to, dealing with life and being successful in life and how you actually go about this, because all of a sudden when you start doing socks for other people, boom, all of a sudden it's amazing. So,
right. Well, that's the thing too, man, is like, I think if we pull ourselves out of our own little world, and if we just open up our eyes, when we're at the store, when you're at the gas station, like when you are at the gym, no matter where you go, social distancing or not, there's opportunities for kindness. And maybe it can be as small, maybe it can start if you're just maybe you're someone who doesn't even like to talk or look at people, just start off with eye contact and a smile. It doesn't have to start off with self-sacrificial kindness, but I think it's cool for it to build up to that, because that's such a more meaningful way to interact with people. And, it really turns into, like we talked about before, like an act of service where you're giving of yourself to other people. Sometimes, like we mentioned, like maybe they don't even deserve it. Like maybe, there's someone who you would consider like that isn't even worthy of your kindness, but you do it anyway. Right. And you benefit from that as a result. And so does that other person. So it's like, it's a win-win.
It just occurred to me, because we talked about a little bit about people who you don't think they deserve it, right? Or the bullies or whatever it might be of the world.
Yeah.
If that person, let's say, is a bully of the world, I wonder if they ever had anybody be kind to them.
Yeah.
Because of that, right? So if you are one of the first people who actually gives them that, and they get to experience that, is it possible that something might shift in their head, and they're like, holy cow, you know what I mean?
Dude, that's huge. Think about it. In life, we talk about the see, do, get model, where like you see things a certain way, so you get results that reinforce that. And so if you're a bully, if you're someone who's mean to people, and you think everybody's dishonest, or everybody's like a liar, or everybody's negative this, negative that, you're going to look for reasons to find that. But all of a sudden you come into someone's world and you rock that world by actually being kind to them, even though they're not putting off any kind of anything that would warrant you being kind to them, that you might totally rock their world and shift their perspective on people and like what people are like. And you might change a life, quite honestly.
Yeah, I think it was a great topic, man. I really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah, me too.
I think it was awesome, man.
Well, we hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. speaking of conversations, we would love to have you join the Life Inner app. It's free. Come on over. It's downloadable for your iPhone or for your Android. We have a free gift for you over there. It's called the Life Inner Fast Start Kit. You can also get the desktop version. That's what I use a lot. And so it's just where conversations like this are happening all the time, where we're building up each other, we're supporting each other, we're helping each other, we're encouraging each other. We're being kind to each other over there in the app. So come on over. Also, we'd love for you to leave us a review or a comment if you like the podcast. That helps us know that we're on the right track and serving you, right, in a way that you want to be served. So until next episode, thanks again for listening. It's an honor and a privilege to serve you, and live free and live kind. See you next time.